Okay, three, two, one. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at in the US or around the world. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. Thanks for joining us. And we, as always, want to thank our listeners and people that watch on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks for doing what you do for us because you get the show out. We're in over 100 countries and we're excited about that. But we want to keep going, man, because we got some great stuff going on and want to thank everybody. Again, special prayers to our friends in Ukraine. I've been there many times. Want to make sure that they get special prayers, get shown my Ukraine baseball. Do not forget you. I'll be there soon. Hopefully things will end. And also our Russian friends, because there's a lot of families in Russia that have family in Ukraine. So God bless y'all. Prayers to all of you. We're praying every day for you and watching everything goes on. I know some tough times right now. Hopefully everything will end and we'll be able to help after that. So stay safe, my friends. And today we are excited because, man, this guy, let me tell you, exciting 40 years since 2018 when he retired, but he really didn't. He completed his tenure. 40 years, the longest tenured athletic trainer in Major League history, with the Chicago White Sox, 2005 World Series. He's rehabbed great athletes like Bo Jackson, Ozzie Guillen, Ventura, worked with Michael Jordan. He had 2 All Star games. The list goes on. Basically one of the best trainers in any game, anytime. And let me welcome our good friend, Herm Schneider. How you doing, Herm?
Hi, Pete. Good afternoon to you, or good afternoon or evening, wherever you are.
Yeah, we're right now, I'm with you in Chicago, but we've got a lot of followers, a lot of listeners, all over the world, baseball people that love the sport. And this sport's just growing worldwide, as you know, because you've had a lot of people with the White Sox from different parts of the world, right?
Absolutely. From the Pan Asia to the Dominican, Venezuela, Mexico, Panama, you name it. We've had some players from there. Cuba is really producing some great players.
Well, I love watching the White Sox, and we're going to get into that because I've been to Cuba 9 times. I saw Abreu, a bunch of those guys play when they were younger. Exciting things to talk about. There's some great players coming out of Cuba. Hey, apologize for this, but you're going to be my guinea pig. The first time I'm going to do this on the show, we're going to do some quick questions, right? Quick questions, quick answers, kind of let the audience know a little bit about you, and they're going to get to know more as we talk. So let's start with number 1. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Amsterdam, Holland, the Netherlands, and came over to the United States when I was about 5 years old and grew up in Rochester, New York, home of the Rochester Red Wings, kind of where I kind of grew up, and across the street from the ballpark there. So that's what kind of stroked my interest in baseball.
Cool. And and then when I saw that native of Amsterdam, the first thought, and I'm also throw this one in there. You ever been contacted by the Dutch team? I've been in the World Baseball Classic all over the place to do things for them.
Well, I did get in touch with the general manager of the Dutch team. And if there was a World Classic, I think he was going to ask me to do it. But unfortunately, we had this thing called COVID that hit us that kind of nullified the World Baseball Classic for a while.
Yeah, we're going to tell you what, we've had Hensley Newlands on the show before, and he's a good friend. Really got to know him over the years, been down to Curacao. We're going to have to put that in his ear because you need to be part of that Dutch team in the World Baseball Classic. That'll be awesome.
I'm 100% Dutch.
All right. What about this one? Something you do daily to make yourself better?
I do a lot of reading about, my industry, my business, the new technologies that are coming out. And there's a lot of different things coming out these days. I try to spend a little bit of time looking at that through some of my journals and publications that I get. I talk to some of our doctors and hear what they're doing these days. And we use Rush University Medical Center, Midwest Orthopedics is our group here in Chicago, which is a group of excellent surgeons from every subspecialty that you could ask for. So I'm really lucky I have a good inroads to them.
That's awesome. And, always learning. That's what I love to hear, man. 40 plus years, always learning something new. And folks on Facebook, if you got any questions, put them in the comments section and I'll take a look at them. Hopefully we can get them through. Here's another one I really like. Something that you do in retirement other than baseball?
Well, I mean, I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but if I do, I apologize in advance, but I love shooting. So I go out and do a lot of shooting. Actually, I went out today and did a little bit of shotgun shooting. I like pistols. I like shotgun. I like almost every type of shooting armory there is.
I'm with you. I do the same thing. I go to the range and I like to practice. It's just fun, at different targets and everything. So it's something that I enjoy, kind of get away from things.
Absolutely.
And the other part I wanted to ask you about, you said what was the reason that you got into being an athletic trainer?
I was very lucky when I was a youngster. The athletic trainer in Rochester kind of took me under his wing and brought me in the training room and kind of babysat me, so to speak. I was just a very young fella at the time, and I really just took a liking to it. And it was really before athletic training, sports medicine was really even a category, so to speak. I guess I'm one of the pioneers of it, because at that time, there really wasn't a true athletic trainer. It was just kind of like a person there to help tape an ankle, and the coaches used to do that. As you know, Pete, some of your coaches,
Yep.
That's what they do. And here comes a young kid that is interested in that and learned from a trainer from the Red Wings. And then I just applied some of that to the high school and college sports that I went to. And I kind of tell people it was like a snowflake turning into a snowman. So, it just, as a young man, and here I am, an older fella, and, still doing it.
Yeah, we're both there. I can understand that one there. What about, you've the difference in when you started and now, what were the major differences of an athletic trainer? You mentioned obviously, that when you first started, you were doing different things, but what's the major changes now between the jobs?
Well, there's so much technology involved now that you really have to be involved in the science. It's a little bit more science-based now and evidence-based and different things like that. So there's people are dissecting the sports medicine industry a little bit and getting more in depth with it and doing more different things with it now. And, it's like anything else. It's just the way it is, and the way kids are growing up in colleges now. They've got all these new techniques and different tools that they use, and you got to stay up with the times. It's just like anything else. You got to stay up with the times.
Absolutely. The other thing is you're currently like an advisor for medical issues related to free agency, amateur drafts, player acquisitions. Even though you're retired, you're really not. You're doing some things for the White Sox. Explain for in the draft, there's a lot of homework that's done. Obviously, the scouts do a lot of homework, but from a medical issue, there's a lot of homework that's done before you draft a player, before you even, especially, I would assume all players, but especially the ones, at the top.
Well, that's true. And I haven't done that very much the past couple of years, but I was doing it quite a bit, looking at the medical records that come out of the kids' colleges and high schools that the scouts and MLB put in there. Everybody gets the same information, so everybody sees the same thing. Now, if you're really close with a coach or a trainer from a university that player played at, you might be able to get a little bit more information just in conversation. But when it comes to written information, everybody in baseball gets about the same information. And then you need to, it's so to speak, the word is like buyer beware. You better do your homework and check and see what you're getting, because once you get them, they're yours, and you need to make sure that the history of the young fella, his surgeries, his previous injuries that he had, and you can see kind of like, you can find out how a player recovers whether he's it drags on with him or not. What kind of personality he has along with it, by if you just read the notes that come along with the information from the college trainers, high school trainers, et cetera, et cetera.
And nowadays, I mean, especially like you said with technology, I mean, you know, you can almost predict that by an exam. You can almost predict something happening in the future.
Well, if he has a lot of one particular type of injuries, then you can see that he has a weakness in that particular area, and you just have to be cognizant of that. Now, that doesn't mean you might not draft him or get him, but that means when you do get him, you have to be aware and spend more time on his weaknesses to make him stronger in those particular weaknesses. A lot of times it's not the medical side that drafts a kid, it's the abilities and the stuff and the power and, you know, his bat control. Those are the kind of things. Medical is one thing, but the game is played by players and talent. So that sometimes trumps sometimes a medical issue. Not all the time, because it depends what it is. But a lot of times they'll say, you know, we'll just have to keep an eye on this kid, but we're gonna draft him and bring him along slowly and see if we can build up his weaknesses to get over the top of it.
You know, Herm, kind of the elephant in the room, you know, it's always, you know, the biggest topic, obviously, you know this, are the injuries to pitchers, especially because of velocity or because of other reasons. And I know, you know, it's not a perfect solution, you know, it's not going to be solved completely, but what's happening in the game? Why do you think, what does the research show? What does your background have that shows, you know, why young kids are getting hurt, pitchers, more than ever? And even at the major league level, I think you're seeing more injuries at times.
Well, a lot of it has to do with pitchers is mechanics, you know, and it's very, very difficult to change the spots on a leopard, so to speak. You know, a lot of times mechanics are the DNA of the person. You know, you're not going to be trying to change it. The younger the kid is, the better chance you have of changing his mechanics, that he doesn't hurt it. But I mean, there's so many kids in high school now that are getting Tommy John surgeries, and kids are throwing harder. I think that everybody wants to throw as hard as they can. And if you have bad mechanics and you throw hard, it's a formula for potential Tommy John surgery. You know, it's just the way it is, you know, and Tommy John surgeries are very predictable. You know, I mean, if a fella has to have it, nobody wants to have it, because you always hear about the successful ones. You don't hear about the ones that become unsuccessful. They usually go by the wayside and you don't hear about them, but you do hear about the certain ones that, oh, he had Tommy John and he's come back, he's throwing better than ever, harder than ever. That's true, but you also don't hear about the ones that had Tommy John and can't come back and haven't come back. So, I mean, you know, a lot of people think that that's the way to go, is get Tommy John, but believe me, that's not the right thing to think about. And shoulders are much more unpredictable than elbows. Elbows you can predict pretty good, and hopefully you get a good result. You get the right surgeon to do the surgery, and then you get the right people to rehab them and do it the right way. It's pretty predictable. Shoulders are pretty much unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get in return after a shoulder surgery, a labrum repair, or rotator cuff, bone spurs and different things like that happen in shoulders. But it's occupational hazard, Pete. You know, I mean, the body wasn't meant to do that, so to speak. And you're doing something that's basically unnatural. And there's a price to pay for that sometimes.
Why do you think, you know, because again, being in 40 years, you've seen a lot of players. Now, in the older days, there didn't seem to be as many injuries. And I could be wrong. There's many injuries, and guys were pitching 9 innings. You know, and I understand why the game's changing and you've got, you know, so many innings that a pitcher pitches and all that. But why, back then, I remember Jim Cott talking about there weren't as many injuries back then than there are now. What do you attribute that to? Just velocity again?
Well, I think, I don't think people threw quite as hard back then as they do now. I think the mentality now is to throw harder. We didn't have MRI units back then. We didn't have a lot of the things that I was talking about earlier, the science, the testing, and the different things that uncover things more now. And I think the people are, they just handle things a little bit differently now than they handled them back then. A lot of, like for instance, Nolan Ryan, he had torn ulnar collateral ligament in his elbow for quite a bit of his career, never had surgery. He rehabbed it and kept it strong. But nowadays, if they have the discomfort, you kind of lean towards maybe repairing it. And that seems to be the trend these days. Not that kids are not as tough now, but it's just a different mentality growing up, I think, as the way you grew up to the way people grow up now. I think you may understand what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, 100%. And the other part of this is, like you said, the technology. Now, I'm assuming now with all the technology, you have a better idea whether it should be a rehab or it should be a surgery. Back then, we didn't understand that as well because we didn't have all this technology.
Absolutely. And now you get an MRI and you get a 3D MRI. I mean, it's pristine and you can see how bad it is. And, the physicians will say, well, this fella needs to get it repaired if he wants to have a long lasting career. So then you do it and then you hope that the surgery goes well. You hope the rehab goes well and you hope he does well, on how he handles everything. It's not the most pleasant thing to go through for sure. There's some discomfort involved, and first trying to get the range of motion sometimes is very uncomfortable, for a good while. And if you don't get the range of motion, strength and endurance that follow that, it doesn't matter. You got to get that range of motion back first.
And it's interesting, you said, it's a hazard of the job, obviously, because it's not a natural motion. So I get that people are going to get hurt no matter what. What's interesting is if we all understood what that, after surgery, what that rehab is, and you rehab Bo Jackson's hip. I had a double hip replacement all done at one time about 8 years ago. So I understand what the rehab part of that was, when both your hips are being done at the same time.
I believe you, Pete.
And I'd rather not go through that, right? So talk to the players out there and the parents and coaches. I mean, we want to try our best to work really hard at avoiding getting hurt, right? So you're in better health, better training, better at whatever it may be, all the different things. We want that first. So that way, hopefully your chances of getting hurt are a little less.
Right. Well, I've always been been very successful in my career with prehab versus rehab. I mean, it's you convince your players to be compliant to doing the things they need to do to hopefully short circuit the problems that may come up with certain different exercises. It's not a guarantee, but I was pretty successful on keeping guys healthy by doing prehab things, shoulder programs, arm health care, shoulder health care, just preparing them for the battle. And it was like, I always told our guys, it's like sometimes people understand money more than anything. So it's like, when I have you do your prehab, it's like you're putting money in the bank.
Yeah.
When you're on the mound and you're throwing, you're making withdrawals out of that bank account, So it's like anything else. The more you put in the bank account, you don't go broke at the end. You have more to work with. You don't become bankrupt. So the more deposits you make, the more you have. So the more you work at your prehab and your shoulder program, which is not the most fun thing in the world, Pete. You know, it's kind of not, I mean, it's somewhat boring. It's labor intensive, but it's pay me now or pay me later type of mentality. And that's how I kind of it made our players think about it. You can do this now and have a good, healthy career and make money, or you can not do it now and you'll break down and you're going to do the rehab anyway, but it's going to be more painful at that point.
Great point. I love the incentive part. You know, and speaking about pay me now, pay me later, you know, I would assume common sense, that approach needs to be taught to the younger kids, the coaches working with young kids. You know, the training is so important that because by the time you get them at whether it would have been when you were in the minor leagues or in the major leagues, you know, by then there could be a lot of things going wrong with the body that even you can't avoid now an injury because it happened maybe, you know, or it began when he was 8, 9, 10 years old. No?
Absolutely. You want to have good compliancy. You want to teach kids good. It's not any different. And I make a lot of comparisons, but it's not any different than brushing your teeth every day. You know, it's things you do so you keep your teeth healthy and things like that. Not any different than that. You know, it's teaching them things to do. And I'd like to, you know, eventually, if I can do that for you with your kids, not any different than that. You know, it's teaching them things to do. And I'd like to, you know, eventually, if I can do that for you with your kids, not any different than that. You know, it's teaching them things to do. And I'd like to, you know, eventually. I was hearing my
conversation. Sorry about that. Keep going. Go ahead. You're good now.
But it's you want to teach the kids good work ethic, good work preparation, so it becomes absolutely second nature to them to do this. You know, I need to do my shoulder program. You know, I need to do my hamstring program. I need to do my corrective exercises for my back, so I keep my back healthy. If you do all those things, you could have a long-lasting career, but it's time consuming. It's not a lot of fun. It's, you know, it's hard work, you know. You don't use a lot of weight for pitchers. You know, we never went over really 5 pounds in the training room. That doesn't mean they didn't do more in the weight room, heavier, but, you know, you don't need to, you know, use a lot of weight to get those muscles strong. They get strong very quick, but they also get weak very quickly also.
What should a young kid, you know, 12, 13, 11, what should they be doing? What's your advice prior to a game? If they're going to pitch, some things that are important for them to do, maybe to warm up or to avoid, you know, that stress. You're still going to have stress, but you know, to kind of avoid that stress when they're pitching.
Well, you know, one of the other things you do is you warm up to play. You don't play to warm up, you know. So you put your shoulder and your elbow and your back, and each person knows where their shortcomings are. But if you're a pitcher, it doesn't matter who you are. You want to make sure you warm up your shoulder, your elbow, your lat, different things like that. Get it warmed up, because once you get on that mound, it's that little extra, Pete, that I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that different uniform, that you give that little extra, and that's what usually burns you if you don't warm up. So warming up the shoulder, the elbow, the body to play kind of gives you an advantage when you're on the mound, and you need to give that little extra that is subconscious. And I think you know what I'm talking about. It's just you think you're throwing, when you do a side day or you do a bullpen or whatever, you're throwing the ball hard. But when you get on the mound and you see that other uniform there, it's always a little bit extra. And that's the part that usually gets you when you have a shortcoming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, here's the other part. What about when the pitcher's done, young pitchers? Advice, you know, on what they should do to kind of warm down or to get them to recuperate a little bit quicker so they can come back and pitch a little sooner.
Well, I've never really been a huge advocate of ice. I've never said no to anybody that wanted ice,
Mhm.
because they're entitled to ice if they want it. But if they said, should I ice? Then I would say, well, I think to do a light shoulder program post throwing to help flush the arm and try to get some of that lactic acid out of there. Ice just kind of slows everything down when you want to flush the arm and you want to move that lactic acid out of there so that, for your audience, the bad blood, which is the lactic acid, you want to get that out. If you put ice on it, you're slowing down the circulation. You might numb it where you don't feel it, but you're not really doing a whole lot of good for your shoulder or your elbow at that point. You want to kind of do some range of motion things and use that as a pump to pump out that bad stuff and bring in nice fresh blood that helps you recover a little bit quicker.
So you recommend, like, I don't know, stim or some kind of massage instead of icing?
Well, no, because a lot of kids don't have all of that available to them.
Right.
What I would suggest is arm weight without weights, and just go through a modified shoulder elbow program that they would do with their weights, except just do it with the arm weight of the arm, because the arm weighs about 7-8 pounds by itself.
Yeah.
So you're lifting 7-8 pounds with nothing, and just go through a few 5 or 6 different exercises after they pitch to help move that lactic acid out. Now, if you have a trainer there or I'm there or somebody and they want to milk the arm, I think you know what I'm talking about there, then you can help move that out. But not all kids and players have that availability to them. Stim, we use a thing called Complex, which is a pump also that kind of you put it on and helps pump out the lactic acid. It's all about that lactic acid, that dead blood that's sitting there that you want to get out, and you want to get fresh new blood in to help recover the arm a little bit quicker. And there's ways to do that, but icing it is, I think that makes you a little bit sorer actually, because you're not really doing anything other than numbing the arm, but it's not moving any of that lactic acid or blood or, that you want to move out doing that. It's just sitting there then. So a lot of people will say, well, when you take the ice off, you get a blood rush, but I don't know if you get enough of the blood rush to cleanse the arm to milk it.
Herm, music to my ears, and I'll tell you why, because you said you've never really used ice that much, never believed in it much. About 3 years ago, Gary Reinell wrote a book along with the person who invented the ice method, and came out with research showing that exactly what you're saying. So all these years we've been using ice, but they're saying the research doesn't show that it actually speeds up the recovery process. It actually slows it down. So to ask you, at the major league level, all these years, guys were icing. And then were you able to convince guys not to ice? And if you were, how did you do that? Because that's sometimes a mental thing too, right? I'm used to doing it my whole career. Now I've got to change.
Well, you would talk to them a little bit and say, why don't you try this? Let us do this with you. We'll teach you how to do this. See if that works over the ice. Because ice is just, I think Sandy Koufax used to ice his arm, and because he did it, everybody else did it also. But we would just kind of convince guys. And then in our minor league system, our other trainers believe the same thing. And we had a bit of a policy that when we got a kid in, we would convince them maybe not to use ice and go through some range of motion work after they pitch. They do what they call a cool down. It's like after you go run, you stretch a little bit, right? I mean, you don't just cash in your chips. You lay down on the floor and you stretch out your hands. I'm talking about joggers that do that. They stretch it. Well, the arm is the same thing. You want to cool it down by stretching it back out and doing some exercise. So we would convince them. And then our kids that we are homegrown kids, we pretty much convinced them. And then when they get to the big leagues, they never even ask for ice. They just go do their cool downs, but it's the kids that sometimes you acquire from other organizations that their philosophy may not be the same as ours. And if they encourage ice, I mean, different strokes for different folks, and
Sure.
other organizations, sometimes they just throw ice on just to throw ice on, they don't have a whole lot of reason to do it sometimes. But and then players like it and they come over and they want ice. I've never say no to a guy that wants ice, never. But then I always ask him to do the cool down after the ice, and try to convince them that, maybe we, instead of icing for 20 minutes, maybe go 10 minutes and then maybe 5 minutes. And then eventually you get them off of ice altogether. And actually, a lot of them feel better when they don't ice. Their arm feels lighter than it does. Actually, a lot of them, after they get done, they go in the shower anyway, and they put hot water on their arms. So it's that's what makes them feel good. So.
And folks, I'm seeing a lot of universities not icing. Matter of fact, there's universities that are called no ice universities. I'm familiar with major league players. They a lot of times may not give their names, but that don't ice anymore. And folks, I know John had a question about the thing I mentioned with Gary Reinel. You can go to the podcast, check it out. There's 2 shows on the podcast, Gary Reinel, Reinel, if I spelled that correctly. You could Google it to my podcast and check out the 2 episodes. They're over an hour. Each one gives a pretty good description of everything. So check that out. What's the toughest part of your job as an athletic trainer?
The compliancy and convincing guys to be compliant is probably the biggest job, because once again, I always was in prehab and I always wanted guys to work so they wouldn't get hurt. And that was always the hard part. I always would give a guy an invitation. Well, put a little note on his chair, you are cordially invited to the training room to do your prehab today, just kind of make light of it a little bit and have fun with it, and because I know that if they do that, they're going to have less injuries and everybody benefits from that. Always the player is the prime person in the mix, but the organization's in the mix also, because the more you can keep a player healthy for his sake and for his numbers that he gets at the end of the year and his, how many times he takes the ball and everything else, and how, I always kind of like when you give a guy a baseball to start the game, do you want to just go in and grab it, or do you kind of just say, oh, I'm not sure I feel like that grab ball today, I want that guy always to want to grab that ball and be ready to go, because he's going to pitch well. And we've had a lot of great pitchers that have done very well through the White Sox over the course of the years, that have made themselves a lot of money and were able to, do a lot for them and their families. When they got out of the game, they had a good, life going after baseball. So that's what it's all about. But also for the team's sake, you want those guys healthy, because it's hard to replace your best players. I mean, you want to keep your best players on the field all the time, because that helps the team, it helps the organization, it helps the city of Chicago, it helps everything, But first and foremost, it helps the player themselves.
And the other part of all this, you've had so many major league pitchers that you've worked with, that you've had on the clubs, not just the White Sox, but other clubs. A major league, what's it look like when a trade is made, you get a new pitcher, or even before the season? What's that communication with you look like? How does that go? And what do you guys talk about?
Well, Pete, actually, when you get a new player, you don't go in there right away and try to change him. You know, you let him do what he does best in his mind. And then over time, you talk to him and convince him. Once he gets to know you and you get to know him, you make a few changes to everything. Like we said, you know, a big icing guy. So you say, okay, well, after he's gotten his feet wet and he's comfortable with his new teammates and new city and new trainer, everything, you know, it's not easy to get traded. You know, it's you're coming into a different environment and you don't know anybody. So you don't want to just jump in there and force feed what you think on a guy. You just let him go. And over the course of time, you try to convince them, maybe try this, you know, see how it works. If it doesn't work, you can go back to the way you want to do it, you know, and things like, and let me tell you, most of the guys that try to change and do it, they don't go back, you know. And I've had many a trainer from other organizations call me up and say, man, this guy is the most compliant guy there is. You know, he just comes in, he does his work, and you know, you don't have to stand over his shoulder. He knows what to do. He takes his own responsibility and all that. You don't want anybody attached to your hip. You want to teach them how to take care of themselves. And then that becomes part of their DNA after that, where this is what I have to do to be successful. Make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's also fair to say, especially nowadays, major league pitchers, especially, whether it be their routine before they pitch in a game or whether there be after a game, their routine and what they do, it kind of varies, like you said, according to the individual.
And what they do, a starting pitcher versus a reliever, a short reliever, you know, I mean, everything, it's not a can operation. It's individualized. Because a starting pitcher, when he comes out, whether he throws 30 pitches or he throws 100 pitches, he's still got those 4 days to get ready for his next start. So he can go through a regular shoulder program, so to speak, regular arm care. But, you know, the long reliever, if a guy throws 20 pitches, then the long reliever comes in, and then he's got almost the same thing as a starting pitcher, but maybe not quite as much. And then as your bullpen goes to the back end, you know, you have a little bit of a modified, because that pitcher may have to come out tomorrow and pitch, you know, may have to pitch 4 or 5 days in a row, you know, hopefully not, you know, but sometimes he has to come out and throw 1 inning, or, yeah, 4 or 5 days is a little exaggerated, but, you know, three days or 3 days in a row or something like that. So you have to kind of keep him ready for him. But those guys are just so good at what they do. Then that's why they are where they're at. They're ultimate pros. They know how to take care of themselves.
Well, I'm curious because, you know, it can help high school, college, young kids. You know, when you take that pitcher, major league pitcher that pitches 3 days in a row, because it'd be crazy to take, I would think, 11-year-olds and have them pitch 3 days in a row. I think that'd be one of the worst things to do. But
yeah, I wasn't talking about them.
No, right. But that's what's amazing about these relief pitchers. They, at the big league level, they pitch 3 days in a row, and a lot of them could be very successful at it. What do they do to kind of regroup at, you know, after they pitch that day? Now they know they might come back tomorrow. What's some advice there? Does that change, you know, on how to, you know, what kind of workout should they handle?
Well, I mean, they do the same thing. They do a cool down, you know, but it's an abbreviated cool down compared to what a starting pitcher would do. It's just an abbreviated program. Instead of 20 things that the starting pitcher does to cool down, maybe it's 10 things or 5 things, just something to stimulate a little bit of movement in that arm and that lactic acid. A lot of back end guys don't ice a lot, you know, because they want to keep that arm moving along, you know. So it just, once again, it depends on each individual what they like and you're not going to take ice away from a guy if that's what he feels makes him successful. you know.
Herm, there's some of this when you talk about it depends on the player, the type of person and different things. Are we also talking about body structure? In other words, are there evaluation going on of their body structure, their strength, their weaknesses, and then you determine how somebody's handled or what kind of program they're on?
Well, yes, that's very true. I mean, if you're a long, lean guy, which is kind of like an ideal type of pitcher, they need maybe a little bit less than the big, strong guys because the big, strong guys just come right at you, so to speak. So they throw hard and they need maybe a little bit less at the time, so, or maybe a little bit more. It just depends. Once again, it's so individualized and you have to get to know the person and see what makes them tick, so to speak. I know I'm not giving you a great answer, but it's so individualized that that's what, people don't understand is we have to get to know that player and find out what he needs on an individual basis to be successful.
Yeah, and you hear a lot of times the player has to give you a response how they feel, right? I mean, it's all, it can't be just what you guys think, it's how the player's feeling at the time. And again, I would think also with, and I know you're not a manager, but a manager has to make a decision, so many guys are going to available next day, but that player has to be open about, maybe I'm not feeling good right now.
Yeah, they have to be open, but a lot of times they don't give into that. They'll say, I'm ready to go. And
yeah,
that they're a little tired and they need, so as a trainer, sometimes you'll see that they're struggling a little bit with their stuff and you kind of mentioned to the manager, if you don't really need him today, maybe stay away from him. He's available, but if you don't need him, maybe stay away from him for a day and give him a bit of a breather because he's not going to ask for a breather. So,
right. And that's a good point. So the player would come to you, which makes it a lot easier on the player. He doesn't have to go directly to the manager and try to communicate something like that. And no player wants to come out. I get it because it's their job and they don't want to lose their job for whatever reason. What about young kids? Advice for young kids and actually coaches that are working with young kids when it comes to pitching. Anything specific, things that they should stay away from. Don't do this part, maybe pitch counts, whatever it may be. What's your advice?
Well, I don't think any young kid, and you maybe have heard this, but when I get asked when a kid should start throwing a curveball or a slider, it's not until he can start to shave, so it's not like at 11 years old or something like that, try to throw a big curveball. Fastball changeup, is probably the safest thing on the arm at that young age. Because if you learn how to throw a changeup, it's almost like throwing your fastball. So it's probably the most easiest thing on your arm that there is. Now, I know a lot of guys try to hump up and throw a lot hard, but after a while, they know that you can't hump up too much because actually you lose velocity when you hump up. It's when you're nice and easy. But, curveballs, sliders, fork balls, splitters, all those things should not happen with a young kid until at least he can shave. Now, that's like, 15, 16 years old, maybe, and somewhere in there.
Why?
Well, because the bone structure in your arm is still developing, and you have the bone growth plates that are in the joints that are not strong enough to handle that, and the ligaments are not strong enough to handle that because they're not matured enough. They haven't grown enough, and I think people don't understand the anatomy of their arm. They just want to go out and play baseball and do the same thing the big leaguers do, throw this, throw that. they're just not ready for it. Their arms are not matured enough. They're not developed enough. They haven't grown enough. The growth plates and everything else are still growing on young people, so.
I think that's great points.
Well, those are good points, and it's true. You got to be careful, and we're trying to do pitch counts on kids and not let them pitch 2 days in a row, and because let me tell you, coaches who I love to death, but when they're coaching a team, they want to win the game, not necessarily worry about the health of the kid, because if this kid has good stuff and he throws the ball well, you want to use him as much as you can. But you're really not helping the kid. You're actually, could be hurting the kid in a lot of ways. So
yeah, and when I was at Mickey on baseball school, man, it was back maybe 40 years ago. You're seeing it now at the big league level. Back then, we had 11-year-olds, we had 14-year-olds, but we used 6, 7 pitchers because we didn't know the pitchers. They were only there for a certain period. They pitched a lot back home. Now you're seeing that, at the big league level, you're seeing a lot more pitchers used in the game. A pitcher doesn't go to 3 batters as much. So, and I bring that point up, Herm, because I'm a big advocate also. If you teach your kids to throw correctly, as you mentioned earlier, mechanics, they got a better chance of pitching. So you could have more pitchers on your team instead of having those 2, 3 pitchers always pitching all the time.
Absolutely. You're always going to have your kids that are a little bit better than another, but those are the ones you want to take care of and make sure that they continue to get better, because for their sake, they could go on and play high school ball and then college ball, and with the grace of God, they could go to the big leagues and maybe be successful. But if they break down in high school or even in pony league or whatever, because they're trying to, most parents think their kids are going to be the next Roger Clemens or whatever. And that's a good way to think. I mean, my daughter played softball in D1 in college. And I mean, I saw many of the parents think that their kids were going to be on the Olympic team, and
Right.
So it's just the way it is. My daughter, she knew better because she lives with me. So, but she was a good player. That's why she got, scholarship into University of South Florida to play softball. So, but, I mean, parents sometimes can be, the biggest problem a little bit. They want their kid to throw that curveball instead of saying, don't throw that curveball, throw a changeup, learn how to throw that changeup. Changeup is a great pitch to learn. I mean, it's an equalizer, really. You throw one, in the big leagues, you throw one at 98 and the other one is at 70. That's a big difference and that the health becomes better. The guys that have a lot of shoulder problems are the ones with bad mechanics and throw hard versus the guys that don't throw hard and are pitchers. They pitch more than just to be flamethrowers or whatever. But, I mean, baseball looks for hard throwers. So you can't teach somebody to throw the ball hard. You can't teach that. That's a God-giving thing that you have. But you can teach somebody how to throw a curveball. You can teach them how to throw all the other pitches, teach them that, but you can't teach them how to throw a fastball. You either have it or you don't.
And fair to say, whatever age group you're working with, obviously you want to watch all your kids and make sure they're all healthy and everything's going well, but really be careful with the kids in that age group, again, that throw really harder than most of the kids in that age group. You've got to be careful with those kids, especially.
You do. You have to be careful with them because they'll try to do more than they're capable of doing. They'll try to throw harder, and then they come out of their comfort zone, and then their mechanics are just out of whack, so to speak.
Herb, listen, you've worked with, and we've got about 10 more minutes left. You worked with so many great athletes. And I know I put you on the spot on this because it's hard to pick one. If you want to mention a couple, but what's one or two of your favorite players that you just loved working with because of their attitude, because of how they, handle themselves and all that?
Well, I mean, Harold Baines is probably right at the top of my list. He's, we spend a lot of time together, and he's ultimate. He's the greatest. And I mean, I have a whole slew of them. Robin Ventura, Greg Walker, Rich Dotson, just a whole, a bankload of Jose Abreu. They don't make them any better than Jose Abreu. He is the cream of the crop. He's unbelievable. Ray Durham that I had, Vance Laws. I mean, they're wonderful guys. I never really worried about how they played. I just liked them as people. That was my big.
What did you? Okay, without name, you don't have to mention names here, but because to give advice again to our kids that are listening too, because we got players that listen also. What did you not like from players? What they did sometimes, maybe something they said or what they did, or what they were thinking at the time. Is there things that kind of got you a little upset, but even though you may not have shown it?
If they wouldn't take constructive criticism, that was always like, okay, you're on your own, so to speak. If you break down, you break down. If you don't want to, a lot of guys wanted what they wanted, and it wasn't working for them. I mean, we saw that it wasn't working for them, and you try to convince them, why don't you try this instead of this? And they didn't want to do that. And I never took anything personal, because once again, it's business and it's not personal, but you would say, okay, if you don't want to do it this way, fine, you do it your way. And I would just spend a little more time with somebody else that maybe wanted a little bit more help, but
it's kind of like coaching. It's kind of like coaching. Yeah, it sounds very similar. Because, what I was going to ask you was, even though your title might be athletic trainer, or they have another title for it, there were times I would assume athletic trainers still has to deal with the mental part of the game, right? Players have problems. They come to you with problems.
Big time.
What was that like? I mean, now all of a sudden you're dealing with family issues or something else that goes on.
Well, a lot of times they would just, because I was older than them, and I was hopefully a little bit maybe wiser than some of them, and they would come up and say, I'm having this or whatever. What would you think? And I'd give them how I felt about it. And, a lot of them would use it and became very grateful because it would help. I mean, I've seen the problems sometimes are not different over the course of years. There's just different people with the same problems, So I've had, a little bit of experience with a lot of different things. It's just different players at different times, so I would learn from back then. Like Tom Seaver told me, he said, Herm, the one thing that players need to learn is the difference between soreness and pain. They're two different things. So I would try to use that because Steve taught me that. And I would see what a guy had, and I would say, you need to kind of learn the difference between what your soreness is and what pain is. And I would be able to apply that to somebody else because Steve gave me that information. So I've been very blessed with a lot of big name players, and I've dealt with a lot of them, and I hold a whole lot of them in very, very high regard.
Folks, if you're watching on social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, we're with Herm Schneider, World Series champion 2005 Chicago White Sox, athletic trainer, longest tenured trainer, Major League Baseball. I'm assuming going to be a Hall of Famer. What a great person, great. And then I've read a lot of things on her, but it wasn't her. I know that Reinsdorf mentioned. I know I saw in one article where just unbelievable what he's done for the players throughout all the years, but also his personality and how he dealt with people. The humor, all this stuff. So I think that's important when you're looking to do have a career in athletic training. You've worked with Bo Jackson. You had this after he had his hip surgery. Did he have to? You have to set up a plan for him. Were you involved in that and on rehabbing? And how did that look? And how was he to work with?
Well, it was unbelievable. I mean, I got him when he got hurt from the football injury with the Bengals, and the Royals let him go, and we picked him up. And trying to rehab a guy with a bad hip, which about, to play big league baseball was quite a challenge, and it wasn't working, Pete. It just wasn't working. So he and I sat down and we talked, and I said, this isn't working. I mean, you're not getting anywhere, and you're putting yourself through pain. I says, I think you need to get your hip replaced, and we'll find the right guy to do it, and then we'll try to rehab you. But more importantly, it's for your quality of your life versus baseball. I mean, you're giving it your best shot. It's not coming. You're in pain, you're hurting. And he would never complain. Let me tell you, Bo, as you know, with a hip, he'd have a hard time putting the shoes on, because you cross your legs and it hurts to put he'd never complained once, but you could see that it wasn't working. So we talked and said, maybe it's time to get this hip replaced. We'll get, like I said, get the right person to do it. But first and foremost, it's for your quality of your life, so you have a pain-free life and you can live your life. But we will try to rehab you to play baseball. And that's exactly what we did. And I was able to rehab him to get him back to play baseball. And he promised his mom he would hit a home run, and came right back. And the first, I think it was his first game, he hit a home run against the Yankees. And I was always worried about him sliding, and we practiced sliding in spring training. I remember his first slide was against the Pirates in spring training. And I said, oh boy, here we go. Can you imagine? I mean, trying to slide with a hip. And,
absolutely. Back then, what kind of surgery was it back then compared to now? Because technology's changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, they just did an external one on the side, and now they split you down the middle a little bit to make it less invasive. They have different, but his was good. But he's so active. He's a hunter. He likes doing this. He's had his cut 2 revisions already on his hip. He doesn't care. He just wants to live his life, and he's doing great. But it was a challenge. It was uncharted waters for me to rehab a guy with an artificial hip. I never thought I was going to have to do that, but I did it, and we were successful. We worked his butt off. And we spent a lot of time together, days and days and days, getting that hip ready for baseball. We got it ready to just walk without a limp, and then we decided, well, we'll take it another level and get it ready for baseball. And he played baseball.
And obviously great athlete, very strong. I remember we honored you and him at the Pitch and Hit Club, and I remember taking a photo with him, putting, my arm around him, and it felt like there were weights on his shoulders. I felt like I was touching weights. But being with him that whole time, okay, we know he's a great athlete, he's strong and all that. What else did you see in him that made him the great player? Because he would have been a Hall of Famer in Major League Baseball eventually. What made him so good?
His will to do good. He always wanted to do nothing but do the job greatly. He wanted to do it to the best of his ability, and he worked hard at it, worked very hard at it. Like I said, he never complained about anything. you set up a program for him. He would never look at it and try to change it in any way, why don't we do this today? Or he would just listen. And because of that, all of that, he came back and played. I don't think anybody else has played with an artificial hip, have they?
No, not that I know of. What about you? Saw, obviously you were in a dugout and you saw him in games and everything, and everybody fails. You're going to fail in a game of baseball no matter what. Did he do anything different when he failed? What did he look like? Did he keep his calm? Was he more intense?
He was always, he didn't like to fail by any chance, but he didn't throw his helmet or do anything like that. He was not happy when he failed, but
Sure.
He kept his cool because he knew there was going to be another at bat, shortly after that, and he was wonderful. He and I are very close. We spent a lot of time together. He's just an awesome person. He really is.
Love it. Love to hear that. Hey, we're getting close, but I got to ask you a couple other things because I think it's interesting. We're going to jump to a different personality, Ozzie Guillen, because I love Ozzie Guillen. And I'll be, I watch both the White Sox and Cubs, so I know in Chicago, you're either one or the other, but I like watching both teams. I do watch the Cubs a little bit more day games because I like watching day games on TV. But I watch the White Sox also pregame and postgame because of Ozzie Smith and the guys on that show, even Frank Thomas. And I love the way, because Ozzie's honest, and I love that the way he talks about the game and he's just entertaining and all that. What was he like? You did a rehab with him. What was he like in that situation or even during the games?
Well, it's interesting. I worked him very hard from that. He had a collision with Tim Raines and he tore his ACL and his MCL with collision with him. And I worked him incredibly hard and teamed him up with Bo a lot in the wintertime. Once the rehabs got to the point where we had to do a little bit more of the baseball skill type of things.
Yeah.
So and Bo would challenge him too. So, they're very close also. But Ozzie is absolutely wonderful. He's like a son to me. I've had him. Here's a quick story. We traded Lamar Hoyt for him.
Yeah.
I don't remember the year, Pete, but Roland Heeman was the one that made the trade. And we were in spring training in Sarasota, and Ozzie was coming into spring training. And Roland came in the training room and he said, "We got to pick up this kid Guillen that we got. He's coming in the airport." I said, "No, Roland, he's sitting right here." He goes, "Oh, I thought that was the bat boy." That's how Ozzie was, so skinny, so small.
Yeah, they look young.
So that's how long I've known Ozzie.
Wow.
Basically, I wouldn't say his whole life, but pretty much his whole life. I knew him before he was married, when he got married, before his first kid, second kid, third kid. So, I've known him forever and he's special. But, you better be ready. When you ask him a question, you're going to get the answer that you may not like sometimes. I think you know what I mean. On his shows, he's the same way,
that's why I love watching him, to be honest with you, because you don't know what he's going to say, but you're interested also in knowing what he's going to say because you want to know what he thinks.
Oh yeah, he's going to tell you right. He's going to shoot from the hip on most things. Tell you, So
I could imagine this too. And then I got one more thing for you, and then we'll finish it off. This has been great. I appreciate the time. I could imagine Bo Jackson, him working out, that he wasn't going to say no to Bo. I guarantee you that. Right?
He would never. But I got to tell you, if you look at the statistics, after he hurt his knee and he missed that year, when he came back after his injury, was the best year of his career.
Ah,
So
interesting.
he worked so hard that work took him into baseball, and he had the best year of his career that year coming back.
Love it. Interesting. Love it. And matter of fact, I go back and forth once in a while, even though he knows a lot of people on social media with him on LinkedIn. I tried to get him on the show, but I know he's busy. Finally, the White Sox have had a lot of Cuban players. You mentioned Abreu, but they've had other Cuban players. When you first saw the Cuban players come in White Sox system, what impressed you about them?
How polite they were, how grateful they were. The Alexi Ramirez was probably one of the first guys I got. I mean, they're brought up very, very good. Their families teach them very good. I mean, they're very respectful, very grateful. Always, por favor, please, gracias, thank you. I mean, very, 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 very well put together, respectfully. And they're all that way. I mean, Moncada's that way, Abreu's that way. They're very, very nice, and they work hard. They're grateful. They did a lot to come over here and play baseball, so they have a lot to be grateful for, and they are. They're very thankful people and very respectful people.
Great to hear that. Love it. And just on Alexi Ramirez, just give you a little story there. A friend of ours was the president of the Baseball Federation with Cuba. And, he was the one that gave Ramirez permission to go see his wife in the Dominican Republic because she was having a baby. Well, that's when he defected. We never saw the president. He no longer had a job after that. But that's just a side story, because he thought he was coming back, and I don't blame him. I mean, great life in the States. This is where they all want to play. And the other thing is, don't you think, tell me if I'm wrong here, but don't you think they seem to be a little bit more prepared fundamentally, ready to play in games because they're a little older too, right? They don't come over at 16 years old.
Well, they play a lot of baseball. So that's like their minor league years playing all that baseball. So yeah, I mean, we've signed a couple more guys. Cespedes, the young Cespedes kid is with us. So I mean, yeah, they're good. But even all Latin kids, are so grateful, pretty much. And their number one thing is going to play baseball. That's what they do. They don't have all the electronic toys that a lot of our kids have. They go out and play baseball, and they don't even have shoes. They just go play on rough fields, and they play on bad hops, and they learn how to catch all those. So yeah, they're very grateful people, very good people.
Absolutely, well said. Herm, can't thank you enough, man. I appreciate it. Hope everything is going well for you. I hope to see you somewhere, maybe at at the park. But hope everything's well. And I really appreciate you doing the show.
My pleasure. Glad to do it, Pete.
All right, folks, that is Herm Schneider. Thank you very much to Herm. Thank you to Brian Crock, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Of course, special thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world. Continue to spread our social media, spread the show. God bless you all. Remember, stay safe, be healthy, and we'll see you on the next show.